In this video, we will talk about the ethnocide and ethnic violence that took place in Sri Lanka during the Sri Lankan Civil War and how nation-state building was desired through fundamentalism. The war was fought between 1983 and 2009. This war was fought between the Sri Lankan Armed Forces and the LTTE, also known as the Liberation of Tamil Eelam, where the LTTE fought against the government, demanding a separate state for the Tamil citizens of the country, separate from the majority Sinhalese citizens. Let us first look into a brief background of the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, there exists two major ethnic groups. The majority Sinhalese, most of whom are Buddhists, consists of 74% of the total population. And the minority Tamils, most of whom are Hindus, consist of about 18% of the total population. Until the 1940s, these two groups lived in harmony more or less. In fact, these groups existed on the island under different kingdoms. Three regional sovereigns existed on the island when the colonizers approached in the 1500s. One was the independent Tamil kingdom, which was located in the northern peninsula region of Jaffna, which was in existence from the 13th century. And the other two kingdoms were Sinhalese, with their capitals at Kotte and Konde in the central hill region. Then how did an ethnic divide come into existence? The roots of the modern conflict lie in the British colonial rule when the country was known as Ceylon. Poonambaram Arunachalam, a Tamil, was appointed representative of the Sinhalese as well as the Tamils in the National Legislative Council. In 1919, major Sinhalese and Tamil political organizations united to form the Ceylon National Congress under the leadership of Arunachalam to press the colonial masters for more constitutional reforms. However, the British governor William Manning actively encouraged the concept of communal representation and created the Colombo town seat in 1920, which dangled between the Tamils and the Sinhalese. From here on, the sense of Sinhalese majority as a hegemonic and authoritarian rule came into existence. Now the Weberian prophecy comes into play when even here, intimate social forms dissolve to be replaced by highly regimented bureaucratic legal orders. Policies employed by the politicians of the Sinhalese in post-independent Sri Lanka had been largely ethnocentric and had favoured the Sinhalese. In 1948, the Ceylon Citizenship Act was established, which deliberately discriminated against the Indian Tamil ethnic minority by making it virtually impossible for them to obtain citizenship in the country. Approximately 700,000 Tamils were made stateless. The tip over into ethno-nationalism and even ethnocide in democratic polities has much to do with inner reciprocity of the categories of majority and minority. In 1956, Prime Minister S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike passed the Sinhala Only Act, an act which replaced English with Sinhala as the official language, the only official language of the country. This was seen as a deliberate attempt to discourage the Sri Lankan Tamils from working in the Ceylon civil service and other public services. The Tamil-speaking minorities of the Ceylon viewed the act as linguistic, cultural and economic discrimination against them. They were convinced that implementation of the Sinhala Only Act would eventually result in their fundamental rights being curtailed. It sparked the first riots between the Sinhalese and the Tamils. The Civil War was a direct result of the escalation of the confrontational politics that followed. In the late 1960s, documents relating to a separate Tamil state of Tamil Eelam began to circulate. At this time, many people began to participate in separatist activities. Several Tamil youth, among them Velupillai Prabhakaran, also became involved in these activities. They carried out several hit-and-run operations against pro-government Tamil politicians, Sri Lankan police and civil administration. Supported by the ongoing politics of conflict in Sri Lanka, politicized Tamil youth in the north and east started to form militant groups. The most prominent of these groups was the LTTE, which was formed in 1976 and led by Venupillai Prabhakaran. Here was the beginning of fundamentalism being formed to fight fundamentalism. There was a fundamental and dangerous idea of a national ethos. Said Prabhakaran, This government has assumed power with the support of the chauvinistic forces. It has achieved victory by indulging in wide scale violence and massive electoral malpractices. Those who hold important positions in the power structure of this government are hardline ultra nationalists. We have our doubts as to whether this government, which pathetically depends on Sinhala racists and Tamil traitors for its sustenance, will be able to make any bold decisions to resolve the Tamil national question. Violence continued with weekly reportings of public violence of burning down buses and other public property. The starting mark of the war can be traced to July 23rd, 1983. This incident is infamously known as Black July. On July 23rd, 1983, 12 Sri Lankan soldiers became victims of a landmine when their truck hit one in Paleli Road in Tirunelveli, a town in the Jaffna district. The following day, security forces swiftly reacted to avenge the killings of their colleagues by killing 41 people in Jaffna. The violence quickly spread to Colombo and other parts of the islands, in which many neighborhoods were destroyed and nearly 100,000 Tamils in Colombo were displaced. Extreme forms of collective violence and large-scale killing were the byproducts of totalitarianism and fascism. Said Prabhakaran, "We are a movement fighting for liberation. We are not an ordinary group which stands abjectly in askance of concessions. Our goal is that we should live with honor, peace, safety, and freedom in our home soil, our own soil which historically belongs to us. This is our national aspiration." The naturalization of a singular national ethos through the rhetorics of war and sacrifice was also done through linguistic uniformity. Brainwashing of young adults to take part in the cause. Until 1986, the LTTE had sufficient adult units in the operation, and young recruits were put through the Tigers' standard grueling 4-month training course as soon as they reached 16 for planning the assassination of two world leaders. A study by a UK-based Sri Lankan researcher, Dashi Ranatung, revealed that at least 60% of the dead LTTE fighters were under 18 and were mostly girls and boys aged between 10 and 16. The road to a sacred nation. Ethnic purity and cleansing. Modern polities have put blood in the center of their national ideology. Blood and nationalism appear to be a much fuller embrace. There is a demand of whole blood transfusions, usually requiring some part of their blood to be spilled. Ideologies produced by various forms of desperation about asymmetry produce victims and martyrs as instruments of freedom. The Tamil nationalists and leaders felt that if Rajiv Gandhi, through the IPKF or the Indian Peacekeeping Force, showed that he was not a supporter of their cause, as towards the end of the mission, the IPKF was standing off against the LTT army. Afraid that if he comes to power again, their cause will be ignored, the LTTE group planned and executed the assassination of the ex-Prime Minister. The assassination of Rajiv Gandhi occurred as a result of a suicide bombing in Sri Perumbudur, near Chennai in Tamil Nadu, India, on 21st May 1991. Fundamentalism may be seen as a part of an emerging repertoire of efforts to produce previously unrequired levels of certainty about social identity, values, survival, and dignity.